people with real jobs.
Hello?
Self-employed people. Which do you want to be? This is Certifiably Unemployable. It's time to fire the boss and become self-employed. Maybe you need a push to get that business or side gig going that you've been dreaming about for years. And if you're an entrepreneur, you can listen to stories and get experience from people who've done it. Get ready to change your life. Broadcasting from the compound, this is Certifiably Unemployable, and this is Sean Dean.
Welcome to Certifiably Unemployable. I am Sean Dean, your host, and thank you for being a part of this show. Now, don't forget, you can connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. You can also find us on many of the podcast streaming services like Spotify, iTunes, as well as Anchor, and we're now on Google, so don't forget to check us out there. So this is your opportunity to fire your boss. Maybe you've had that idea in your thought mind and your process where you're like, you know what? I've got this concept and I just want to turn it into something so I can finally be self-employed. Well, that's what Certifiably Unemployable is all about. So we want to, again, thank you for being a part of the show. And we want to allow you the opportunity to just kick back, relax, allow yourself to dream about things that are going to make it for you and your family, and where you can finally become certifiably unemployable and fire your own boss. And this week, we're actually talking about something very important. It's the finances, right? Financial foundations is actually this week's topic. And our guest is someone who actually is local to me in the area. I know that, you might not be listening to this in our backyard here in Florida, but just so you know, we're based out of Palm Coast, which sits right between St. Augustine, Florida, and Daytona Beach, Florida. So, and Eddie Herrera, who is our guest this week, he was originally born in Columbia, South America, moved to Palm Coast from Connecticut in 1977, and has been a Flagler County resident ever since. He's got a bachelor's degree in business, specializing in finance and marketing from the University of Central Florida. Eddie was an entrepreneur since the age of 14. You and I have that in common, Eddie, so that's awesome. He had his own lawn business, a paper route, right here in Palm Coast, and after graduating from UCF, he's been a business owner, operator in Flagler County since 1991, owning a real estate brokerage company, custom home building company, and is currently a co-owner of Alliance Financial Partners, which is a local financial planning practice. He holds a lot of different certifications. Listen to this. He's Florida real estate broker license. He's state certified residential contractor's license, a Series 6, 7, and 66 securities registration, which is held with the LPL Financial, as well as a 215 license in life, health, and variable annuities. So he's definitely an expert in the knowledge base there. So Eddie's also a Dave Ramsey trained financial coach, which I'm excited about because I think we can make that a topic later on in the future. So some of his most recent achievements were the completion of the Behavioral Financial Advisor, BFA program, where he earned a BFA designation in 2019, along with the Registered Financial Consultant designation in 2020. And one of the things that, Eddie, you and I have in common is the passion to help others succeed by being self-employed. So, ladies and gentlemen, Eddie Herrera. Eddie, welcome to Certifiably Unemployable. Thanks for joining us.
Sean, thanks for the opportunity and the privilege to be on your show, and looking forward to sharing some great ideas and concepts with you and your listeners.
Absolutely. And, so one of the biggest things with me when it comes to the financial side to business, I've owned multiple businesses over the years. I've since I'm an entrepreneur, entrepreneurs tend to take risks. We dive in with both feet. Sometimes we don't really think through the process. And that's one of the things that I want this show to help people do, because if they're not self-employed and they're brand new and they've got this concept, I want people to be able to learn from my mistakes, other experts' mistakes like yourselves. And that's why we always say we're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, because being self-employed, I would not trade it for anything, but it's not always easy. And so one of the things you think about when it comes to finances and the financial part of your business is you've got You've got your fee or your service that you're charging people, whether it's retail, service oriented, whatever the case may be. You've got the money you're charging, but then you've got the expenses. Now, you would think your normal expenses are your lights and, whatever equipment, whatever widget you're selling. So that's one of the things that you can't forget about when it comes to being in business is that, there's so much more to it than that. It's not just income and expenses, because what people forget, Eddie, I know me personally, I didn't think about when I first got started in business is, what do I need to do to set money aside for the lean times? What do I need to do to set money aside for my retirement? Because it's all up to me, right?
Right.
So Eddie, I want you to tell us, what are some of the most important things you think that someone in business, even if they've been in business for years, maybe they need to take inventory and have a checklist of things that they need to do to make sure that their business is set up with that financial foundation?
Well, great question, Sean. And I can tell you, times like we're in right now, very challenging times with COVID-19 going on and the whole pandemic situation. One thing that really resounded with me and really kind of saddened me was truly how many businesses have gone under because of lack of reserves, not being able to, weather a 3 or 4 or even a 6 month situation. And, you're talking about some big companies like Hair Cuttery and some other things that just can't make it. And, there's some local businesses too for various reasons, but that has been so relevant to me in the last several months because of a lot of companies, had they been properly capitalized and had proper reserves, they would be able to weather, times like this. And sadly, 4 to 6 months, they're closing their doors. And that really saddens me because as well as I do, Sean, you can be years in this business and in whatever business an entrepreneur, you decide to open, and it would be a shame for 3 to 6 months of something to happen and you have to close your doors after putting your heart and soul into it for years and years. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of a long way of saying that it all starts with what I call the financial B word, and that's the budget. Is you really have to look at, what does it cost you to run your business? Obviously some obvious things with, overhead and stuff like that, but marketing, you need to look at technology. You need to look at do a vast and a lot of due diligence to say, what is it truly going to look like for me to run my business? And then make sure that when you build your budget around that, you're very realistic with your budget, and I think that, especially when you're looking at trying to forecast, that's a really challenging thing in any businesses, it's sales and equipment and those kind of things, but truly looking at making sure you have a very good foundational budget and a realistic budget. And that's kind of where it starts, is looking at that.
So how does somebody know that they have that they've got a realistic budget? I mean, you've got somebody who's a newbie. They have no idea what they're doing in this business. Now if they went the franchise route, they've got something that is tried and true and figured out. But of course, then they've got franchise fees. They've got startup costs that they normally wouldn't have, which every business has. But I mean, how does somebody know that their budget is even accurate?
Great question, Sean. I think that's where the kind of the due diligence part of being an entrepreneur is very, very important. And what I mean by due diligence is just doing your research and doing your homework. So if you're going to go into a particular industry, interview people that are in that industry, do your research, figure out what does it take to run that kind of business. And there's a lot of, and Sean, you've been in business, different industries, there's a lot of innuendos, a little things that are just kind of the unforeseen stuff that just don't always pop up. But I think that if somebody's going to go into a particular industry or open their business, do a lot of research, take your time and see what those unforeseen soft costs are and some of those things to be able to realistically build that budget around what your business should look like and what it's going to truly take you to keep your doors open, your lights on, and do your due diligence.
Okay. Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, due diligence is always super important. And of course there's always resources out there. You've got CPAs and you've got different types of professionals that you need to make sure that you have in your corner. because you've got to have that ammunition. You can't, you're doing it for yourself and you're building this business on your own, but that's where you've got to be willing to, I guess, allow yourself to delegate and also bring the right people on your team.
That's an excellent point, Sean. In fact, is making sure, number one, having a good CPA or accountant is absolutely crucial, because they're going to see things. They're going to be able to give you some good advice on a lot of the cash flow things and a lot of the budget items and taxes and insurance and things like that you're not going to be able to really know that a CPA is truly going to know. So that's a very vital part of your on your team for your professionals, and also a lawyer. Determining, what kind of legal structure do you need? Do you need to be an LLC? Do you need to be an S corp? Do you need to be a sole proprietor? Whatever it is, get those professionals on your team early in the process and let them guide you with some foundational things from the legal standpoint, and especially with accounting. Get a good CPA and talk to him or her very early in your process.
Yeah, because a lot of that stuff you just said about the corporations, S corp, C corp, LLC, we're going to be getting more into that with future topics. Understanding the differences between how to set your company up in the taxation and things, and of course, it does affect you financially. But one of the things that a lot of people don't think about is that they just want to be a sole proprietor. They're going to run it under their social security number. Man, if something happens, not just financially, but you have to have that corporate structure, that LLC set up to protect yourself personally. You want to talk anything about that when it comes to the financial part too?
Yeah, actually, great point, Sean. One of the things that I think a lot of self-employed people do when they do set up their legal structures is they don't behave like their legal structures are supposed to be. Meaning they have an LLC or they have an S corp, but yet they're running their personal household expenses through their corporation. And what they essentially do, if you're not acting like a corporation, keeping separate books, keeping separate finances, checking accounts, you pierce that corporate veil. And now you open yourself up to liability that you thought you had. I'm not an attorney, but I know enough that you have to definitely keep things separate. And a lot of times people want to, pay personal expenses through their business. There's ways to do that legally, but many people look at it as an open checking account. Going to Publix and buying your groceries with your corporate checking account is probably not a wise thing to do if you're truly a corporation.
Right. That brings up a huge point because, right now during the pandemic with the whole, with this whole COVID-19 thing, they had the CARES Act, they had all the money that was available to small businesses, not just for the SBA and the disaster loan, but with the PPP. And some of my business partners and I, I've got some people that are very experienced on the SBA side, very knowledgeable in that, and they've got people that actually they know who to reach out to when it comes to the SBA, and 100% they're in our corner. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is that there are people that we were working with to get SBA funding, and they were not able to get any funding because they just didn't know better. When it came to the PPP and things like that, you've got people who are actually paying themselves. But what they're doing is they're paying their mortgage, they're paying their bills and stuff out of the business, when what they should have been doing was they should have been paying themselves as an employee or even a 1099 subcontractor, because now they have no proof of income. And now their business can't show that it's actually independently paying somebody as an individual. So, and I will tell you, if you have the right documentation, the SBA stuff, and I know the PPP stuff that we were dealing with for people was very simple to get the funding, which was an advantage, which was a huge opportunity during the pandemic. But moving forward, even with SBA stuff and stuff like that, if you don't have all that stuff properly structured and properly laid out, it's a nightmare. And, because when they start asking for the 941s and all that, you're like, what? I don't have any of that, And so that's why the financial foundations, ladies and gentlemen, it's super important. I mean, you need to have that as rather than worrying about what you're selling and all that other stuff, you have your concept on one notepad, but on the other notepad, that's in your top three.
Yeah,
For sure.
I mean,
For sure.
and for sure. I mean, as we said earlier, getting a good CPA on your team, they're worth their weight in gold, because they're going to be able to teach you and show you the structures, what you can do legally, what you shouldn't do, what you should stay away from, because that's really, if you get your stuff in order and you start it early, it's gonna save you a lot of grief and a lot of headache down the road. So getting a good CPA is definitely they're worth their weight in gold if they're good.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, we know some good CPAs here locally in Florida and in our area. I don't know if that's a service that you provide with your company, Eddie. I'm not really sure exactly all the services you provide, and of course, I want to have you have an opportunity to tell us more about that. But eventually on Certifiably Unemployable, and I'm not sure whether you're listening to this right after we recorded or if you're listening to this a year, 2 years from now, we are going to have some resources on certifiablyunemployable.com for you to be able to tap into other resources and things on the website. Maybe you're looking for some software to help you run your business that can create the profit and losses. And I want you to talk about reporting. That's kind of why I'm leading into this, Eddie, is because profit and losses, balance sheets, and things like that are super important. So if you don't know where to turn to for that, then you definitely want to check out certifiablyunemployable.com, because we are going to have resources on there as well. So when it comes to reporting, when it comes to software, when it comes to things that people can kind of do on their own, because, the more you have your CPA do, the more it's going to cost a small business.
Right.
So if there's certain things that you can do, maybe you can grab that CPA, hire the CPA and say, I need you on a quarterly basis, but what can I do to help make your life easier? What kind of reporting can I do? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I know a very common software that a lot of people use, are very somewhat user-friendly, and a lot of the CPAs are very knowledgeable with, is QuickBooks. And QuickBooks is one of those that, as far as you don't need to be, a rocket scientist, an expert in that, but whoever's going to be doing your books, whether it's yourself or you're going to hire a bookkeeper, is getting the proper accounting reports is a very crucial step in knowing your numbers. Being able to track your profit and loss, as a P&L statements, your accounts receivable, your accounts payable, knowing your balance sheet. And then, of course, back to the budget, being able to track on a monthly, weekly, daily, however you want, whatever level you want to get down to, is tracking your actual expenses versus your budgeted expenses, actual income versus budgeted income, and literally looking at those. And the more you look at that, the more you gauge and have a pulse on that, the better off you're going to be. But back to your earlier comment, Sean, when we're talking about financial foundations, everything we're talking about is truly about building the foundation that your business is going to be built off of. As well as I do, you're going to go build a home. It needs to be a solid, strong foundation, and you can go as high as you want it to go. But if you're building it on sand, or you've got a lot of potholes, and it's very obvious, you're going to be in trouble. So build that foundation correctly. Take the time and do the due diligence to do it, and you're definitely setting yourself up to succeed much better than if you don't do that.
Absolutely. So what would what do you think? And I know I didn't tell you I was gonna ask you this, but as far as Dave Ramsey, what would be probably his number one piece of advice for an entrepreneur, someone who's starting a small business?
Well, he's a big budget guy. He's very, very big on knowing the numbers and truly understanding what you're getting into. But his biggest thing is staying away from debt. And because, there's times to leverage things and there's times to not. So sometimes, and in fact, he has a whole curriculum called EntreLeadership that you probably would want to look into, that is based around all of his principles and kind of his guiding ways. And it's all based on, obviously, on entrepreneurs.
I've heard of that, actually. Yeah,
it's called EntreLeadership, and they have a lot of resources out there too. but he's really big on especially the accounting, is knowing your numbers, knowing the reports, and understand how to read those things. And that's very, very important. So he would echo that.
Awesome. I always encourage people to dream big. I encourage people to just shoot for the stars. But one thing we want to think about when we get into business, because I know that there's a lot of people, they have this big dream, this big vision. Matter of fact, we're working with somebody right now who, she's got a great concept, and I know it is 100% going to be a huge success, but it's a big project, So sometimes you got to take those big projects and you got to say, okay, what can I do to break it off into sections? So that way, number one, I'm not biting off more than I can chew financially, but more importantly, I need to be able to maintain it, but I want to get my business started as soon as possible. So what my business looks like today is not going to be what it's going to look like 2 years from now, Right. And that's one thing that a lot of people need to realize is that, they might be wanting to, have a sellout crowd every night and sell all their products the next day and be a full restaurant right away. But listen, if you have to start a restaurant with 20 seats, then start a restaurant with 20 seats.
Right.
Eventually you'll have 100, 150, whatever your goal is. If you're starting a business and you want to have a full service restaurant with liquor, but you can only do beer and wine, then start it with beer and wine. Don't wait until you can get your liquor license to start a business, because that's going to stop people from moving forward. Right. Yeah. So the reason why I'm bringing that up is because, I was hoping that you can expand upon that a little bit more, because I'm sure you see a lot of times when people have these financial dreams and these plans and everything else they want to do, but maybe you have to advise them to just scale it back. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. There's statistics out there that I've been privy to, but there's like a 50% failure rate of most businesses in the first 5 years. And, you can get statistics on each industry, like the restaurant industry has a very high failure rate.
That's a tough one.
Yeah. It is. And so I say to that, if people say, I have this idea, and that's great. So once you have that idea, back to the due diligence, do your research, go get as much knowledge in that industry and that business as you can, because just because it's a good idea doesn't necessarily mean the way you go about it is going to make it successful. And if you do your proper planning and you do it right, your probability of success is going to be much higher than if you do your homework and do it right, than just, I have this idea, I have this dream, and I'm just going to go out and go full in with really not figuring out where the landmines are and the things that really probably could have been avoided. But you touched earlier, Sean, is knowing, figuring out the scale. You got to walk before you run, and you got to crawl before you walk. It's okay. Every successful person that has opened a business, it's not like they opened up, and they have 100,000 square feet day one. A lot of times they start in a garage, they start in a smaller retail space. You have to be, number one, be willing to change and grow, and number two, you have to be every business, especially with technology and what's happening today, it's ever changing. And if you think you're just going to get into this and be like, this just because it worked 3 years ago does not mean it's going to work today. And you have to be very fluid. You have to be flexible, and you have to be, one of the reasons, Sean, that I have so many, registrations and licenses, but I tell you, I'm a big student of learning, and every industry I've been in, any kind of registration, any kind of designation, I've always learned something, and I've always been able to take that with me. So the more knowledge you have when you're going into whatever that dream is you want to do, the better off you're going to be. And understanding that you can't know it all, tap into those resources of those top credible professionals and utilize them, because they're worth their weight in gold. Yep.
You brought up a point when you talked about using your resources and technology and things. And that's one of the biggest positive takeaways that I think, if we can bring positive into what's going on with the pandemic, I think businesses being forced to have people work from home and really tighten up their brick and mortar expenses and allowing, I think they're seeing that they don't need to pay these big overheads to run their businesses. But, if you have a company and you have something that you're wanting to start, maybe look at it and say, well, are there things that I can do virtually through the technology and through Zoom and through these platforms that are going to help me launch my business a little faster, more efficiently, enabling me to reach a different type of audience? And guess what? When your business does launch, you still have that virtual side of it, And so to me, I think that's a huge, huge positive thing that's going to come out of this whole pandemic. I believe. Yeah,
I definitely agree. And you made a key word you used, Sean, was audience. Is that when you're going to start your business, who's your target market? Because if you're trying to attract millennials, you better speak millennial. You better know what their habits are. You better know what their online behavior is. You need to know that technology is not it's not an option. You have to be in the technologically savvy for them. If your target market is Gen X's or it's elderly, that's a different approach you're going to deal with those people. So you just really have to know your audience, as you said, Sean, and everything is going to be built around how do you connect, how do you attract, how do you make the end user and build that long-term connection and relationship with, where you can continue them as a repeat customer and provide them a product or a service that lasts.
Absolutely. Perfect. No, it's a great point. Great point. So once again, we're talking about financial foundations, super important. I mean, crucial when it comes to any business. If you're a seasoned veteran in the entrepreneurial world and you've been running your business for years, there's nothing wrong with having another set of eyeballs with a professional. Take a look at your company and say, you know what? I've been running it this way for X amount of years. Can you just look at it and tell me if there's anything I need to tweak? Because you know what? We're not perfect. And when we stop learning and when we say, I know it all, typically that's time to sell your company and retire, because you're going to run out of fire and you're going to fizzle real quick. So, I mean, I've been in businesses before where I've just lost that burn in my belly and I'm like, you know what? I need to get out. I no longer need to run this company. So you either have a resource in your team that can run it for you, or you tap out. But I encourage everybody, if you're a veteran, to have somebody look at it with a new set of eyeballs, because I know that's going to help you. So before we wrap it up tonight, with this week's episode, Eddie, I want you just to kind of give us a little more about what Alliance Financial Partners are all about. What do they do? Do they only work with local clients here in Florida? Can you just give us a little resume on them?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm co-owner, and we started it back in 2010. So this year makes our 10-year anniversary.
Awesome.
We are a full comprehensive financial planning firm, and we work with individuals that embrace financial planning. And financial planning means that we're going to take you from, ideally retirement and Social Security planning, asset protection, estate planning. We're going to assess risk. We're going to do Monte Carlo simulations. We're going to do a lot of different things in the financial planning process to basically make sure that people, when they retire, to number one, set them on a plan that they can retire, and they'll be able to look forward to age, from whatever age they retire to age 95, that they can know that their plan is going to work with certainty, and they'll be able to have the retirement that they want and and do it with dignity.
Perfect. So maybe we should, for future topics, we can break down, what a 401k is all about, what an IRA is all about, and all those things, because there's so many, you hear all this 401ks and IRAs and Roth IRAs, you hear all this stuff out there. And a lot of times people are like, sounds good, but I don't know what it is. And how do I know what's benefit for me? So we can do that in the future. And, maybe there's some unique things that we can offer our listeners here at Certifiably Unemployable. That'll be good too. So,
yeah, we have a lot of small businesses that we work with. And I'll tell you, and when we go through the planning process, not only working with their accountants, But when we talk about retirement planning and things like that, and you touched on it earlier, Sean, is that one day, if the goal is to sell this, sell your business, one of the biggest things is that people understand is that, again, back to that accountant and knowing your records and your reports, is that if you have to have proper documentation and proof that you're making the money you are, because, nobody's going to buy your business just on, I make this cash here, but my books say one thing. Does not matter. You got to prove it. So,
and we see it all the time. We see it all the time. These people own cash businesses, which are great.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people are like, well, if it's cash, I'm gonna do what I got to do with the cash. But when you go to sell your business, that's when it hurts you.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, that's when it hurts you. So, there was a time in our business when we were running it, and we were making a lot of cash, and then there was also a time in our business where, like, you know what, we want to make this company look very, very healthy and fat, so we're going to make sure that cash goes back in the bank. And we had to pay taxes on it, but you've got to understand your game plan, and that's why your initial strategy of what is your goal and why are you doing what you're doing and what is your game plan. You need to know that going in. And again, I'm going to stress, your business today is not what your business is tomorrow, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
And that goes with financial goals and everything else. Eddie, we appreciate it. Before we wrap it up, you got any last minute words that you thought you might have left out, or?
No, I'd actually like to thank you, Sean, for creating a venue and creating this opportunity for people to learn, to grow. It's people like yourself, Sean, that sometimes people need a little bit of encouragement. And I just admire you that you're becoming a resource. You are a resource for people to be able to tap into, to utilize. You have already alluded that you're going to have a resource area and for people to tap into, which is great. So I applaud you and your team for what you guys are doing. And I'm honored that you asked me to be on the show. And I truly look forward to kind of getting more specific into other things as you need me. I'm here to help. And just appreciate what you're doing, and just wishing everybody safety, and with all this COVID, and hopefully this thing goes away soon. And just looking forward to growing with you, Sean. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, I appreciate that, Eddie. And I'll tell you, folks, look up Eddie Herrera on social media. I know him and I are friends on Facebook, and we both have been local business owners in our area for many years. But the reason why you want to be in a circle with someone like Eddie Herrera is that, your posts on Facebook and things that you do are very positive, and that's what people need in this world, because people don't understand it. You are who you hang around with. People Absolutely. 100% don't get that. And of course, that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother day, but there's always going to be a need for financial advice. And I really appreciate the compliments. I will tell you, business, being self-employed, being an entrepreneur, it's in my blood. It's a passion of mine. And I haven't always been good at it,
Yeah.
But I've always been passionate about it. And that's the reason why I wanted to do this show, was because people need to understand that they're not the only ones that are scared to do things, and they're not the only ones that fail. We all fail. I'm sure everything you've done hasn't been peaches and cream.
Not at all. Not at all.
It'd be nice, but no, so I appreciate your feedback, and I appreciate your knowledge, and I appreciate you being a part of Certifiably Unemployable. So with that being said, we appreciate you being a part of this show this week, and just don't forget to connect with us. If you have not subscribed on Spotify or on YouTube or Apple or Google, do so. If you haven't connected with us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or any other social media site you can find us on, because we're going to keep on growing. We appreciate you being a part of Certifiably Unemployable. Until next time.
You've been listening to Certifiably Unemployable. Ready to fire the boss yet? You're on your way. Sean has been self-employed for over 20 years. So if that's something that you want to do, something you've been dreaming about for years, Sean has all the knowledge, good, bad, and indifferent. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from this show. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on Facebook and Instagram at Certifiably Unemployable. Find us on YouTube and at www.certifiablyunemployable.com. Till next time, this is Certifiably Unemployable, signing off.